Chrissy, I'm the CTO. There we go. I got cut off by the Zoom bot. Okay, start again. I'm Gary Chrissy, CTO at Capris AI, and I'm here to talk to you today about, let's get this slide advanced. There we go. The AI Ready CFO Playbook. This is part two of a four-part series, Solving Data Chaos to Enable AI. I have with me Lillian Buziak. She's the Chief Revenue Officer at Capris. And we will both be able to answer any questions or any other discussion that we have after we go through some of these slides. All right, so let's jump into it. So today's agenda, right, is around the topic, your data doesn't have to be perfect, but it also can't be a mess, right? So AI is really a fantastic enabler in taking some giant leaps forward with data, but we're still going to talk about, especially when it comes to finance, that there's still things that need to be done a certain way to ensure that you have accuracy and you're not misleading yourself or any of your stakeholders. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick recap on what was discussed during part one, which was an Edward Roski session, finding money with the SPA filter, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we're going to jump into what we're kind of looking at today, which is the current data landscape. How do we, the challenges we've always had, what's old is still there. I won't even say what's old is new. It's just the same. It hasn't changed, right? We still have a lot of different systems that have to work together. We have to kind of qualify that and understand what is good data and what's good enough. As you'll see with AI, good enough can sometimes be a kind of a leap forward over some of the things that we used to have to do in the past. We'll look at project pitfalls and how to avoid them, and maybe some actionable steps and summarize what key takeaways, and we'll also do a Q&A. All right, so real quick, what was the SPA filter? I really like this. It's pretty straightforward, simple, profitable, automatable. And this is not like the old good, fast, cheap where you have to pick two. We really want all three in this case, because this is what's going to help us find what is the ideal kind of target areas to go after with AI to get things rolling. We do not advocate for spending a lot of time developing a massive AI strategy. We are much more of an agile, lean, what we would call minimum viable product MVP type approach to development and implementation, right? Let's get something out into the wild, see how it works, and iterate and build on that, as opposed to just kind of sitting back and trying to analyze it and trying to come up with a perfect solution, because that's really not attainable. We've learned that over the years through experience, whether it's development, architecture, implementation. We want to go figure out what are our early win cases and build on that. Okay, so last time Edward talked about a number of different things. I'm not going to read this slide to you. There's a lot of things here about what are the profit levers we want to look at. I would argue anything you do in business should be tied to one of those profit levers. If you can't get there in one or two hops, then you should rethink what you're doing and why you're doing it, because that's why we're in business, is to drive revenue, right? Reduce cost, profitability. Cash flow is key, and risk is something that we always have to deal with. So if you're not impacting one of those, then you need to stop and think about, well, why am I really doing it? What are the qualities? Again, we talked about the SPA filter, various target patterns that we think are really useful use cases for AI, right? So any of these patterns would lend itself well to especially agentic AI. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that throughout the session, the difference between generative and agentic, right? And how they complement each other. Edward laid out a 90-day plan, kind of identifying those low-hanging fruit or ideal use cases, building it out, getting something up and running. And I'm a big proponent of AI should pay for AI, right? So small investment to start. Let's build one agent. Let's get one chat bot out there. Let's be targeted using that SPA filter. And let's get some value return out of that. And then whatever you're saving from that, then start to reinvest in more AI deployments rather than just coming in. We hear in the news all these stories about all these different ones that are failing, all this money that's being spent. At the end of the day, it's just technology, and you still have to apply good, sound business practices to that. And Edward wrapped it up with a ROI calculation that's useful for when we look at these AI implementations that we're working on. Okay, so let's talk about data chaos. This is something that certainly I've worked with for probably the majority of my career in some form or another. Has been wrangling data, right? So the first thing we have to acknowledge is the reality of disconnected systems. And I'm gonna, ad lib a little plug here and say one of the things I really like about what we're doing at Capris is we're not building products, we're vendor agnostic, right? So the clients that we work with, if you're an M365 shop and you use Copilot, we'll use Copilot. If you're using Oracle tools, we'll use Oracle. If you're using Google or OpenAI, we can use that. And the reality is, because what we're seeing a tremendous amount of is that while all of these vendors are embedding AI into their products, they still suffer from that problem of it all works great if you're only using their product, right? If you have this homogeneous environment where everything is the same, you're on a single vendor, all your integrations are linked up together through their out of the box. But that's not the reality of your world, right? Your world is going to be data scattered across various different systems. Things that, these are some quotes from some of the CFOs that Edward interviewed on his Asking Good Questions podcast, right? It just grew organically. It got out of hand, or it just built up inconsistencies that they experience over the years. As an enterprise architect, I would refer to a lot of this as technical debt, right? Or things that maybe have happened through acquisitions, and various different scenarios that lead to these very heterogeneous environments. I have Oracle, I have Microsoft, I have something that somebody built, and then I have something that somebody else built. I have data in spreadsheets, right? So particularly finance operations and many of the enabling functions, HR, legal, tax, etc. A lot of difficulty in consolidating this to do your analysis because you're constantly trying to pull data from different places. It's very messy. It's not reliable, and a lot of manual effort, right? And so that report that you created last month and somebody wants to see a new version of it, maybe slightly different, it's back to the drawing board, start all over again. Okay, so these are the challenges that we have. So when you look at this, you have to kind of think about getting kind of an idea of what's out there, right? And again, this is not something new. We've been doing this for a long time. And so as we approach AI, we want to lean into this. We want to use the AI tools in finance to help us with this problem. Not just say, oh, well, what's the output of the AI, but how, so both, not just the AI end result, but how do I actually use AI to fix the problem first? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Some of the key things that we want to understand, obviously, importance of data keepers. This is always important, and it's something that we want to try to improve upon, right? So standardizing terms and definitions and ensuring consistency as much as we can across the sources. And again, where before we talked about those were the table stakes that you had to get in line before you used your technology, right? So if I'm building a data warehouse, if I'm building an ERP and stuff, we talk about you have to do this kind of beforehand. Now we're saying, well, not only do we have to do this to enable an AI outcome, but we can actually use AI to help us first do this work as well. Okay, and always apply what I kind of have evangelized for a long time is you want to be a good architect in this and not use technology for technology's sake, right? You have to start with the business capability. What is the problem that you're solving? What is the work that you're trying to solve? And how do you apply technology to that? I hear these executives, we're an AI company now, or what's our AI strategy, and how do we use AI anywhere we possibly can, as much as we possibly can. That's all well and good, and it's going to lead to some results because anytime you direct resources and attention towards a certain area, you're going to get different outputs, right? But I would argue you could get the same if your CEO was as passionate about your ERP system and only having one ERP and everybody being on a standard chart of accounts and everything flowing a certain way, you'd probably get a lot of good results there too. So it's important that we don't lead with the technology. We have to figure out what the business problems are. And one of the other things I'll throw in there is that this unstructured data is now fair game. And the reason why I say this is because unstructured data was typically a challenge for finance, right? But AI allows us to smooth the edges quite a bit more. And we start to get into these scenarios where I can put multiple reports just in a folder in like a OneDrive or Google Drive or Box folder. And I can point an AI at that and say, pull out the information that's in all these files, right? As opposed to having to first parse all that data, structure it, feed it into a database, and then be able to query it. Obviously, with finance data, there's a little bit of give and take here. You got to be careful with what you're trying to get out. If I load in 5 versions of my profit and loss statement and then say, what were my sales last quarter? That's not good, right? Because then I'm going to be in a situation where I may be getting mixed results and inaccurate data. So deterministic systems are still very important, but particularly when I'm doing budgeting and forecasting, things of that nature, where I can be a little bit more flexible. And I do want to derive insights more than just pure data accuracy. This becomes very powerful. Okay, so connecting the dots, right? Mapping your data landscape, where does your data live? You want to start to think about it. It's going to be more than you realize. What are some of the techniques that we employ for discovering hidden data sources? Maybe things that you didn't realize were necessarily there. How do we categorize those data assets and identifying the data flows and dependencies? So particularly understanding your integrations and how data moves throughout your system. What are your sources of truth? What are your books of record? Uh, the reality is isolated, messy data that even the best AI is still going to struggle with that. So we do have to have some level of kind of setting a standard that we say we still need to have certain things that are accurate even for finance, but then how do we build on that? And again, some of the other CFOs that we've talked to quotes things that we hear, best practices from them and strategies, leaning into these different areas, whether it's leveraging different technology platforms that they've invested in, a lot of hybrid approaches that have to work hand in hand. How do we automate manual processes, and really kind of going back to some of those basics, building an enterprise repository, things that were difficult to do in the past. We can use AI to help us get there as an accelerator. Okay, getting systems to work together without starting over. This is huge, right? We hear about these big data strategies and we talk about, I need a data lake. And again, all of these things defer productivity, right? I'm going to go build a data lake. So everybody wait while I go do that. It's great. We need those and they deliver value, but there is value also to be had sooner. And there's ways to build those models better by iterating through them rather than waiting for this big deliverable to land and then everybody's going to use it. We know that we don't ever reach that nirvana state, right? So Edward, likes to use the term data puddles, right? Instead of a data lake, just start out with something small. Again, leaning into that MVP approach, right? What is the minimum reliable truth for one AI play? How do I just find one target area to go prove some value, to alleviate some effort, get my people to get their heads above water so that then I can apply more AI to add more value, right? Uh, all integration efforts should be based on what their potential is. So don't go after the 2% uh, requirement that is going to take 80% of your effort, right? That's not a good way to go. And we get caught in that, right? We say, well, I know I need this data, and that's about, that's the majority of the data I need, but someone might ask for this. That's real hard to get, so I'm going to go problem solve for that. That's not a good use of your time right off the bat. You can get to that later. And what you'll often find is that what you anticipate thinking your users want isn't always what they actually need or what they really want. So as we start to build these MVPs and people start to actually work with it, you start to get different feedback and outcome that may take you in a different direction, right? So really kind of think through what you need, leverage AI for data normalization and cleansing, right? Again, not just AI for the sake of output, but how do I use AI to clean up my master data? This has always been a problem, right? One spreadsheet says the account is a 100. The other one, it has 4 zeros in front of it. One calls it cash dash 100. Right? That was always a problem, that with deterministic code, we had to first go and clean all that up, mapping tables, right? AI can both help us study that and build those mapping tables. And a lot of times it doesn't even need a mapping table. It can use, that's where the LLM, the large language models, the generative AI comes in and partners with agentic AI. I like to think of agentic AI as the realization of what RPA was supposed to be, right? Robotic process automation. So smart RPA. RPA, which I used to call batch scripts, right? Going back far enough, was it was code that was written to automate a process in batch, right? Batch processing. And inevitably it breaks, right? You're loading a spreadsheet into your ERP. You get about 4 months in, someone inserts a new column into the spreadsheet, the whole thing breaks, right? It encountered a column that it didn't recognize. When we start to add the LLMs in, now what happens is the RPA can say, well, hold on, I see a new column, but what is it? And it can look at the header of the column and the structure of the file and go, oh, okay, I understand what's happening here. Somebody added a new account to the ledger. I can map that and I can proceed and load it to the ERP because I know what I need to do with that. Maybe the AI even has reference to the chart of accounts, right? Or a direct integration into the ERP. It can query the chart and go, well, I see a new account in this spreadsheet. Does that account exist? Yes, it does. Okay, great. I'm going to load it, right? It doesn't have to fail in error. So that's where deterministic code problems can now be resolved by using generative AI and an agent that performs that task more intelligently. So use modern integration strategies, APIs, connectors, right? AI is going to even love that better because it can send an API call. It can get a response back. And if that's an error, it can think through, well, how do I resolve before escalating it to a human to have to step in and take over. Okay, good enough data mindset. We've kind of been talking about this, right? Perfect is the enemy of progress. Don't sit and wait until you have it right, especially getting hung up on those outliers that you think are super important. We want to have both speed and quality. And again, AI is a lot more flexible and a lot more forgiving if your data quality is not perfect. Now, again, I will reiterate, we've spent decades perfecting deterministic accounting systems. And when I am talking about my actuals, when I am doing external reporting to regulators, to stakeholders, right, to my partners, it has to be accurate. It can't be close enough. So we're not throwing out those systems, right? We're not throwing out our general ledger. But how we interact with that general ledger, right? Traditionally, if I wanted to get information out, I typically had to know how to write code, or at least I had to be a skilled report writer in that technology's reporting interface. Maybe I have a BI tool, right? Ultimately, some level of SQL knowledge. What AI now does for us is it allows us to do more natural language processing, right? So I can say to an AI bot that I've built, what were the sales for the last 6 months? And that can translate the AI, right? That's what GPT, that's the T in GPT, right? Translator. It will translate that query that I spoke either directly to it or I typed on a keyboard in natural language, and it'll translate that into a SQL query, pull the data back and return it back to you. And it'll build a report so you don't have to spend time actually crafting where does this column fall and all of that. So huge time accelerator. I like to call that the last mile, if you're familiar with that term from logistics, right? Last mile is a telecom. It's used in a lot of different industries, but basically the idea is I can get data from across the Atlantic Ocean, right, from New York to London, but how do I get it to your house? It's that last mile that's always a bit of a challenge. And I see a hand went up. Lillian, did you have a question?
No, that was a mistake.
Okay, no worries. It's good for me to know that there's still people out there, and I'm talking into the ether here. So yeah, so when I think about AI in that last mile metaphor, I think that really helps me make sense in the finance space, right? I'm not throwing out all my old systems, but I am considering how do I help my end users? How do I make them smarter with this data? How do I make them more productive? How do I make it easier for them to get to? And then when we start talking about forecasting and budgeting, where specific decimal point accuracy is not the primary, thing that I'm looking for. Now I can really start to leverage that and start to see maybe patterns that were hard for me to see as a human, right? We've built different AI tools to help us be able to see that. So again, good enough data mindset going into this, right? Aim for useful data, figure out what's good enough to get started, and always, challenge what's out there. Don't just assume that because someone gave you something that it's always accurate. Just kind of figure out what are your authoritative sources, what are your maybe more flexible sources, and which ones are maybe not trustworthy. Okay. So, how do you avoid missing the mark? Avoid common pitfalls, right? Don't try to boil the ocean at once. Lack of data ownership is always a problem. You have to, and we can talk about data mesh strategies and data markets and how we kind of do decentralized data ownership versus centralized ownership. A lot of strategies in this space. Again, not things that we want to throw out. We want to lean into them and use AI to help us uh, do better at this and really lock down who are the owners of this data. Implement data governance guardrails, right? Ground generation in your own data. So be careful using generically trained models like OpenAI, ChatGPT. It's been trained on a lot of different businesses and asking it specific questions. It may start to hallucinate and give you answers because one thing that we've seen with these chat agents is that they don't like to not give you an answer. And they're a bit stubborn in trying to give you an answer, even if it's not always 100% accurate. And they rely on their training models to serve that information up. So you really want to make sure, especially as we get into some of these areas like finance, where we definitely want to be more accurate. We want our budget based on our real experiences, on our industry, things like that. You do want to have those models grounded in your data. PII, be extremely careful. I like the statement here, handle it like it's radioactive. Be very careful with personally identifiable information making its way into your training models. You want to watch that because you never know how that gets served back up to someone else. And you certainly don't want that getting outside your organization into public models, right? So set your approval threshold. So I like to call this scoring the confidence of the output, right? So you should have part of your modeling should involve scoring the confidence of the output. And do we think that the output do we have really high confidence that it's accurate or not so much? Uh, a lower confidence rate doesn't mean I can't use it. It just means I need to think about how I'm using it. And again, would I give something to a regulator that I had low confidence in? No. But could I use that low confidence data to help me start to structure a forecast, understand why there's low confidence and tighten that up? Yes, that's a good use of data. Okay, and measure your hallucinations as a defect rate. It's a defect in the model, it's an error, and that's how it should be treated. They're just a little bit harder to uncover sometimes because, like I said, sometimes these AIs can be very convincing. Uh, and so that's something else that you want to make sure that your people understand is they should be not just taking what the AI tells them all the time as 100% accurate and something that they can go and run with without asking questions. The humans still need to be in charge, at least for now. Okay, we talked about you know, aligning with the SPA filter and those business outcomes, so I'm not going to revisit that. And again, what I just said, human oversight is important. Okay, so what's your action plan? Assess your current state and think about kind of where do I have those puddles of truth that I can start to build on. Standardize, integrate your data, look at how do I apply the tools that I already have and using good practices around that to try and improve in those areas. Pilot and iterate, MVP approach. Start out small, put something out there, validate it, get people to give you your feedback and build on that. Understand how you're going to measure it. Don't just build it and then see what happens. Say, how am I going to measure this? Why am I building it? Again, taking it back to those levers. Is this going to drive profitability? Is it going to reduce cost? Right? If that's one of your drivers, then measure it. Well, what's my my revenue today? And then what is my revenue now 3 months after I've implemented this? Has it made a difference? uh, Educate and empower your team. This is very important, right? You really need to foster AI literacy. You want to encourage people to experiment, right? We want them to start thinking at a higher level. If AI is going to start doing these more remedial tasks and these very manually data intensive exercises, we want AI to take that over. People are going to be freed up to do the higher level analysis, and we need them to start thinking that way. But at the same time, like I said before, don't just blindly trust it. And the other thing that's very important is know that your people are using AI, whether you're letting them use it, whether you're giving it to them or you're not. And we were talking to somebody and they were saying, "Well, we have it locked down." And we did a demonstration, took a phone out of the pocket, took a picture of the screen of a P&L statement, and uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, "Analyze this P&L." And the CFO was kind of surprised about that. I was like, wow, I didn't know it could do that. So your people are using AI. And I like to say, if most people want to do the right thing. And so if I tell my, colleagues and my employees, hey, I want you to use AI, but it's super important that you use our AI to keep our data safe, and you give them that AI tool, they're going to be happy to use it. They're going to be, even if it's not necessarily perfect in every way, they're going to be like, okay, I got something. I will use that. If you try to just shut them down and stick your head in the sand and say AI is not happening, nobody use it, you're kidding yourself. And it's definitely not the way to govern. So lean into it. It's here to stay. And we're in peak hype cycle, but even after the hype cycle settles down, this technology is here, and you have to figure out how to work with it. Okay, so key takeaways again, find that small data set to start with. AI actually helps you solve the data chaos problem. So you don't have to fix the data chaos problem first. You use AI to help you fix it, and then you start to get better output. And don't strive for perfection right out of the gate. So what I would encourage you to do over the next couple days, look for one particular area where you could say, okay, I know I have a data set here, right? Data puddle, we used to call them maybe data marts or just data sets, whatever your terminology is, and think about how you would improve that with an AI tool and what that pilot would look like. Start thinking about the different sources. Again, what's upstream, what's downstream, and start thinking about the process and what would be the steps to make that data more trustworthy so that you could rely on it. And then how would you how would you apply it and improve a process, right? Because ultimately, again, don't just do technology for technology's sake. What is the business process that we're either trying to automate or improve using this technology? Okay, so getting to the end here, your path to AI-driven financial insights. And I love what Lillian did here as the Capris bullet points, right? Confront that data chaos head on. You're never going to solve it, uh, and if you don't deal with it, it's never going to be perfect. That's okay, but get in there, start thinking about, okay, what are my solution, my data sets? How do I standardize them, and how do I start bringing them together now through a lens of using a technology like artificial intelligence? Accept good enough, pilot with a purpose, start with small, right? Govern smart, ensure oversight. And this is where we really want people to start thinking about, people get lost in the governance model. And that's because they think about AI as a technology, and it's like this big implementation. And what you'll hear me talk about in the future, probably future webinars even more, is that I believe AI is a workforce strategy much more than a technology. There is a base level I have to establish what my AI platforms are, who are my vendors, partners that I'm going to work with. Am I going to use a public model? Am I going to use an airtight model that I open source model maybe that I keep inside my four walls? Whatever the case may be, that's fine. IT has to do that. But when we start thinking about an agentic workforce, it really looks more like an individual employee than it does like an application. And I think anyone who's done application portfolio management knows that trying to uh, manage all these agents the way we do an application is probably not a good idea. But if I start thinking about my workforce and my access controls, if I hire an intern, I don't worry about them accessing the CEO's email. I have controls in place that make sure that doesn't happen. And if we apply those same controls and methods to how we deploy AI agents, we can rely on those controls with maybe some slight modifications to handle the scale and volume. And even as far as managing AI agents and who's responsible for them, all of these things fit very well into our existing workforce strategy. Okay, so and that ties into raising the data and AI literacy. People need to think beyond what they've done and start thinking about new ways of doing things. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is when they understand what AI can do and start thinking beyond, well, this is the way we've always done it, right? I can apply AI to an existing process that we've done for 20 years and automate it, but maybe I should ask the question, is that the best way to do it? Just because I've been doing it that way for 20 years doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Build transparency by documenting assumptions and your AI fixes. Okay, you got to treat it just like anything else. Don't let it become just a black box where nobody knows what's going on inside it. So be really good yourself about documentation and sharing that. And fast track this. You want to go fast. You want to recognize the return on investment quickly. Again, start small, low investment, recognize the return, then reinvest. Okay, that's the key here. Big bang approach, multi-million dollar AI implementations. We're not seeing the success there. Where we're seeing the success is the small one-offs and then building on that. Okay, so with that, we'll go into our Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? And I see there's something in the chat, so I don't know if that was regarding data
Yes.
ownership, right? Good.
Yeah, we have one question in the chat, and it's regarding data ownership. Question
Yep.
is, what are the best practices for assigning responsibility when a data puddle is created from sources across multiple departments? We hear this a lot.
Yeah. So that's a great one, and it's a great question, and I've really kind of leaned into this idea of a data mesh strategy, which is more of a decentralized approach, because I think it's really what has to happen. IT in general has infiltrated the business too much. And so what happens is then you have kind of this handoff back and forth, right? Maybe the functional owner uses the data. They're really supposed to be the owner of the data, but they've kind of delegated that out to IT because IT owns the database and they don't have the technical skills or the access to get in there and really control the data. We see there's a problem with that, right? We don't want IT owning the data. They don't actually own the data. They own the platforms that the data sits on. So what you come to with a data mesh strategy is this idea of, okay, I have the data, I have the platform. I'm going to allow everybody to come here and put their stuff on. And you can almost think about it, and this is just coming to me on the top of my head, so it may not be a perfect metaphor, but you almost think about it like a supermarket, right? And every vendor who sells something in the supermarket, they work on their own product, right? They're not worried about the whole store. They just know that their product is in the store and they want to make sure that their product is optimized, that it's visible, that people know what it costs, what's in it, and how to get it, where to find it in the store and how to get it. And so that's really what you want is you want people to own their own data. Now the system has to be set up in a way that makes them able to work with it, right? So you have to have kind of this decentralized model. But ultimately, putting accountability with the people who are responsible for the data is the best way to do it. You have a standardized platform, you give them the ability to validate and control their data, understand how it's being used, right? So that they can come back and say, hey, wait a minute, I never intended for this data to be used in this way. I see that you're pulling it into this system that does this over here, and I have some concerns. You may not have realized that because you just saw the name and the description of the data element and you thought, well, that'll be good, I'll pull it in. So you really need that kind of transparency through your data ecosystem. And I think this is, again, another place where AI can help, right? Because the human brain, there's only so many hours in a day. Even if you're one of these 996 lunatics out of Silicon Valley, right? 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, who wants that? But even then, you can still only read so much. You can still only digest so much. So the AI is really going to level us up and help us both not just AI solutions, but using AI to do the work that we as humans still need to do, and be able to analyze and see those patterns and understand where those problems are. And the other tidbit I'll leave you on with this is one thing I've definitely learned is that people hate to answer questions when I ask them, but they love to correct me when I'm wrong. And so, and I kind of laugh at that, right? But if I ask someone, is this data good in this use case? I may get an answer, I may not get an answer. But if I tell them, hey, FYI, I'm using your data in this manner to drive this because I believe this is the right data to use for this, I may get a very different response. Somebody may come back and go, well, hold on now. I don't think you should use it that way. It's a slight little, change in the way we talk and ask questions, but it definitely seems to work with a lot of people, and especially if people take pride and value in their ownership, and if they recognize that they are associated with that data and how it's being used, and they take that ownership seriously, you will get better quality, better oversight, as long as you provide them the tools so that they can properly manage it. Okay, next question or?
We have one more question from
Mhm.
the audience. It's a known user or participant, not user. How do you recommend we train non-technical staff to effectively question and validate AI generated outputs in their daily work? So this goes back to that human oversight and ensuring that the human and the AI are, working with each other
Yep.
versus against each other.
It's not easy, right? And this starts to get more into human behavior, right? Because you're training them not so much to use AI as much as to be critical thinkers, right? So I could send you two emails, one with a document that's AI generated, one with a document that I generated. Either way, you should apply some level of critical thinking to that, particularly if you're a stakeholder or if you're a subject matter expert on the topic that those documents are contained or are written on, right? So you shouldn't say, although maybe to a certain degree you might see something from Gary and say, well, I know Gary, and Gary knows this topic, and I believe that what he has here is probably correct. I'll just briefly eyeball it, right? And maybe you get to that point with AI also after it's proven itself. Again, going back to my workforce strategy, I like to think of it as a manager oversight, similar to the way you would bring on an intern, a new hire, right? Entry level versus maybe a professional, senior professional, manager, director, right? You go up the line. These titles all are supposed to imply a certain level of competence, subject matter expertise, and authority and responsibility and trust. So if I start grading my AI agents in a similar manner, right? And I say, well, this is an intern level AI. Well, anyone who's working with that, if an intern sends me a PowerPoint presentation versus if a senior director sends me a PowerPoint presentation, you can be sure that I'm going to look at those very differently, right? And likewise, so should your employee if you employ this kind of grading method for your AI. This is a new agent, consider it intern level or entry level. You should be validating its work. You should be overlooking it. You should be looking for errors and correcting and have a feedback mechanism to help improve the AI through retraining, right? As that AI gets more mature in that particular work stream and you realize, this thing is just crushing it every day. It handles this task well. We rarely have to double check it. It has a mechanism for raising its hand and asking for help when it has low confidence or it encounters something that it doesn't know how to handle. I trust it. And so therefore, I'm going to give it a higher level of maybe like a professional, an associate level designation. And I'm going to say, yeah, it's pretty good. I'll still keep an eye on it. If something doesn't look right, I'll dig deeper. But for the most part, I'm going to trust it. And you just kind of keep working your way up along with that. I think it's always about trust, but verification and getting people to be critical thinkers. It's going to be tricky because people are overloaded and hopefully AI can free them up to do that more critical thinking. But some people are a little bit easier to distract and they'll take it for what it's worth. And that is a potential risk with AI that we all need to be aware of, is that a lot of people are going to see what it outputs and they're going to take it as gospel and say that AI told me that's what it is and I believe it. And that's something that we're all going to have to, continue to work on both in our professional and personal lives.
Yeah, very good tips. I think it enables, people to think differently. So those critical thinking skills and apply them, to strategy, apply them to things that actually move, a company forward, right? And
Definitely.
that upskill opportunity, I think, is something all of us have the opportunity to take advantage of, which is great for just the future of the workforce. So we have
Definitely.
one more question, and again, just on the topic of validation, quality, and recognizing what's good and what's not good. Here's a question about data quality. So when you have to make a trade-off between speed and quality, how do
Yep.
you decide which aspects of data quality are non-negotiable versus good enough?
Good question. And I usually let the external market decide that to a certain aspect, right? So anything that is going outside my walls and you kind of think of it in varying levels, right? Will this get me put in jail, right? Will this cause my stock price to crash? Will this result in a fine that is massive and going to get us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? Okay, so that's kind of tier one filter. Are you gonna err on the side of data quality, right? You're gonna say, well, am I gonna risk going to jail by what this AI says, right? So no. So then you got to be more careful. But as I start to work my way down, all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum of practical tips for setting up your office space or your desk to be most effective, right? Where if I get that wrong, who cares? And that's probably not a good example, but I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe you want to say something like, just input volume, invoice volume last month, right? If I'm off, if I say, well, it was 1,000 invoices last month, and somebody goes, actually, it was 1,005. Do we care? I mean, the actual invoice needed to be recorded. That's a separate conversation. But if I'm just looking at that data accuracy, right? What's the materiality of the data variance? If I'm off by $1, if I'm off by $100, if I'm off by $1,000 or $1,000,000, does it matter? Who cares? Is it just internal audience, right? PII. Not only does the data have to be accurate, I got to be making sure that it's properly protected, right? So that one we always call out, any of those regulatory ones. So I think that's kind of your common sense approach to what is the impact of getting this wrong? And if the impact of getting it wrong is huge, then there's your answer. And if the impact of getting it wrong is not the world is going to end, then okay, then I can be a little bit loose and aggressive and always be transparent, right? I've even had stuff that I've given to CFOs and CIOs, and I've said, this is not, I don't have high confidence that this is 100% accurate. I believe it's directionally accurate. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll continue to improve on it. Okay. Most executives that I've worked with are not, they don't have a problem with that. They have a problem being blindsided, right? They have a problem going out there and presenting a number and then finding out, well, that number wasn't actually 100% accurate. It was off by like 4 or 5%. Maybe not a big deal, maybe a big deal. So always kind of have your footnotes that go along with those. Again, that confidence scoring. I believe in transparency that something is AI generated, right? This report was AI generated. Confidence level, 90+%. And then your CFO can look at you and go, that's not good enough. I want 100%. And I say, okay, well, we're never going to get 100%. Maybe we'll get 98, 99%. I'll go put a senior analyst on it to verify it and double check it and make sure it's good. Or they might say, yeah, good enough. Good. I like it. And I appreciate the fact that you got it to me in 10 minutes. And that's worth it to me that I got it in 10 minutes and it's more than 90% accurate. So I think those are the kind of ways you have to approach it, common sense and just kind of working, common sense and transparency and just understanding your risk versus reward. All critical thinking skills that hopefully we all have and we're all going to improve as we start to get out of the minutia that AI can really deliver on. All right. Anything else there? I know we've got a couple minutes left. If there's no other questions, I know Lillian, there was a couple things here that you wanted to call out, right?
Yes. So, yeah, no more questions. But we do still have a few more minutes. So if there are any last minute questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. But in the meantime, we have 2 more parts to the series. The next one will be on your high ROI automation project and how to launch it. That will be on Thursday, September 25th, same time at 12 Central Standard Time. And then the last part 4 of the series will be a case study, how to build your case, right, to your leaders and how to secure the budget or what you should be looking for and how to incorporate it into your overall, budget. I know right now it's budget season. So I think it comes in a very timely manner if you're thinking about building AI into your future or your 2026 budget. So that will be on Thursday, October 9th.
Okay, next one.
And so we just launched an opportunity for all seniors, finance leaders, so VP and above, for a 6-part virtual masterclass. This will be taught by one of our partners, Anna Tiomina. She is a AEI certified leader. She's also a CFO. She does a lot of fractional CFO work as well for, just the broader, community. And together we have developed a 6-week course starting on September 30th. So we'll start with some of the fundamentals, what CFOs need to know in the world of AI, all the way down to, putting together that broader strategy and roadmap. And then everything in between, what we're talking about today in terms of where to start, how to even adopt AI, and what are the risks, what are the rewards, how do I get my team to, just embrace AI and not worry about their jobs being taken over. And then how do we choose, who we work with? So we will cover all of those, really important strategic topics. You can scan the QR code to register, or you can also go to our website, cappers.ai, and there will be a tab called AI for CFOs where you can find more information.
All right. And with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation today. If any of the topics that we talked about are particularly interesting to you and you want to dive into them deeper, definitely feel free to reach out to either myself or Lillian. And happy to talk to you a little bit more about your specific use cases and what you can do, and potentially what Capris can do to help you solve some of those problems and move the needle forward on this, because I think a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. There's a lot of people who are in the game and they're not sure what they're doing, but they're doing something. And that's important. I think that the people who are in the game with a strategy are going to be the ones who really benefit. There are opportunities here for businesses to leapfrog their competitors if they're smart and they're strategically aggressive. You don't want to be Reader's Digest during the dot-com era. Uh, you want to be Amazon or Netflix and overtake your competitors and be the new model going forward. So those who embrace AI and figure out how to use it the right way are going to have a real distinct competitive advantage. So I look forward to talking to more people. I hope you'll join us for our next future sessions. And thanks again for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.